Let's get this show on the road! Today I'm gonna show all you fine killers how I made myself another spring bonnie suit. You know, sometimes you just have to do things yourself if you want it done right. Plus, you of course don't have to risk your own well-being on a spring lock dumpster fire. Yeah, not one of my finest moments. So instead of pretending to be someone we're not, let's bring our friendly bunny boy into this dimension. First off, we need some supplies. A seriously large amount of supplies. Prepare yourself. And if you're lucky enough to end up where I did, you'll find yourself in a costume making workshop. Since the supply list is vast, I'll just make this list for you. And now, let's begin our long journey. We have absolutely no time to waste. We'll be starting off by making the body of the suit. It's always best to save dessert for last. Bodies can be a pain in the butt. But they're worth it in the end if you have a full suit to show for it. Most kids feel uncomfortable seeing a regular old person wearing just the head of a character, so of course we wouldn't want to do that. Think of the children, my friends! To begin, let's start by making a simple foam vest-like base. From there we can add everything else. You're going to want to measure from your lower back, up around your shoulder, and down to your lower torso where your tummy will end. That's how long our piece is going to be made. Next we need to cut it out, add a head hole, and throw it on. Hold up your foam and mark the ends of your shoulders. Then get them the heck out of here. Now, you're going to want to cover up those sides. Go ahead and plug in that hot glue gun now because you're going to need it. Grab your two sides and mark the overlap. Try not to make the sides uneven, though. Or, you know, struggle, like me. This is not going to work. We need some extra hands. Now let's get back to work. Like I said before, overlap your flaps, mark where they sit, cut them off, and glue. Pretty simple, wasn't it? Now we've got a base to build off of. Now obviously you can't put it on, so once it's shaped correctly, go ahead and cut a line down the back. This is where our future zipper will be. If yours still has a wonky shape, just work with it a bit more. Of course you're going to want the end result to look very organic and natural. Now we're going to make the lower torso. Or in other words, the butt of the bunny.
It's time to stop!
Go ahead and put your torso back on. Then measure from the bottom of the vest, up back around to the bottom of the back of it. This will tell us how long we need this piece to be. Go ahead and draw that out on your foam. Now we have ourselves a Speedo. Yeah, not appropriate for the kiddies, so let's get back to the measurements. Now you're going to want to draw yourself an underwear looking piece. This will make it easier later to add our legs and give it the proper shape. To find the measurements for the length of this piece here, measure around your hips. And don't worry if it comes out smaller than your torso, that's normal, and we'll fix that later. Cut and paste. Seriously though, use hot glue or something, don't actually use paste unless you want it to fall apart. Cinch the sides and mark where you want your cuts and glue. Once that's done, throw that mess back on, and have your pal clean up the bottom of it for you. Done. At least, with that part. Now you may be thinking it's time to attach these two pieces, but you'd be wrong. It'll be easier in the future to connect these pieces once we've done the legs. So, let's do them! Now luckily for you and I, we're onto an easy part. Just as long as you don't mess it up so badly you have to start over. Yeah! There is a huge mistake you can make here that will make your life a living heck. Making it too tight. This is a mistake I have made plenty of times before, and it is very frustrating. Just follow my lead and we'll steer clear of that disaster. First off, let's start with the thighs. Go ahead and put on those undies. Then measure from the bottom of the side of that piece all the way down to the top of your knee. You want to be sure to measure from the side because this area is higher up than the front. It's easier to remove foam than to add it. Next, measure the thickest part of your thigh, generally up here, and the biggest part of your knee. Now, like I mentioned before, it is very important to not make it too tight, so hold the measuring tape lightly and don't squeeze. When you draw out your plan, add 5 inches to the top measurement and 7 inches to the bottom one. Yes, 7. Trust me. Now when you try it on, make sure that it does fall down and isn't tight enough to hold itself up. This is very important. If you made it too tight, simply add another slice in it. And yes, I know, I could have just made a pattern for you all to copy and paste like actual sewing gurus, but I actually don't know how skinny and tall or short and stout you are, so it's best if you just fit it to yourself. Besides, do you guys actually think I know what I'm doing? Yeah, even I don't tell myself those kind of lies. Now let's make that knee look a bit less blocky. Grab your marker and make a U shape around your knee. This will make him once again appear more organic and not like a crappy cosplay. Okay, so leg complete. Now it's time to break some rules. And no, I'm not talking about pooping on the floor, that is my least favorite rule to break. I'm talking about destroying what we just made. Carefully cut a straight line down your inner thigh. Please, not your skin, I meant the costume. Oh gosh, no! Now lay it out flat on your foam and trace. Mind-blowing, right? Oh, and be careful you don't actually make two left thighs. Now glue those things back into tubes, and bam! We got ourselves some voluptuous thighs. Maybe even too voluptuous. Let's switch to our half-inch foam for the calves, because screw leg day. Now start by measuring your ankle all the way up past your knee by about 4 inches. Don't worry, we're not going to be wasting foam here, we're making this bunny durable. And then take the measurements around that area, and the thickest part of your calf, and then lastly your ankle, and be sure to add 2 inches to all of those measurements. And let's cut without getting yourself cut, and glue without getting yourself glued. Now we could have just made the other side before gluing it back together to save time and glue, but in my opinion, it's always best to make sure your first piece is done right, so they can be entirely even. Besides, I'm going to be fixing this loose ankle that I would have had to do on both had I skipped this step. Go ahead and pinch that foam for your triangle cut and glue the sides together. Be sure that by the end of your contouring you can still see through the leg. Now we'll need this tube to be able to slide right up into the bottom of your thigh piece. If it's too wide, trim it down. If it's too small, well, then you're screwed. Okay, I'm not that heartless, but I don't really want to delve into all the solutions for all the possible problems you may be having. That just sounds like a whole lot of wasted time. Not to mention the fact that I'm already having withdrawals from being outside of my costume. Now that that's all figured out, let's cut this bad boy in half and trace once more. Don't worry friends, we only have to do this 20 more times. Let's close up our patience and get to attaching these. Finally, we can actually start putting him together. To get started, put on your undies and thighs. Grab your helper and have them mark where the thighs need to be glued on. Be sure to add a line on both thigh and underpiece to make sure they're lined up. Remember that this area needs to stretch quite a bit to walk, jump, kidnap, etc. So be sure to pump out a few sticks of glue on this at least. And to add to the strength, go ahead and throw in some scrap material as well. Next up are the calves. Trace a line where these will sit, just like before. And don't give yourself high waters. Kids do not want to see hairy ankles. And don't worry if the ankles seem too long, we're gonna have to make sure those fit perfectly with the feet later on. Oh, forget we have feet too? Yeah, this is a full body suit, my friend. Take a look at the progress bar, this tutorial is going to be an all-nighter. Now slather on that glue and make sure it's on there good. This part may be tricky since you're working inside a foam tube, but I believe in you. Now we got ourselves a leg. Or two. Sucks to be you, Foxy. Now it's time to attach our torso to the legs. And just like before, we need to mark where it needs to be glued. However, our legs are in quite the fragile state. Foam alone is easily tearable, and regular clothes we're wearing likes to grab onto it like Velcro. So if you're thinking what I'm thinking, grab that morph suit. Not your birthday suit, please and thank you. The morph suit is very convenient as it allows for a smooth entry into our costume. It's also comfortable and allows us to quote-unquote wash our suit. Even though he'll probably become a stinky bunny over time, let's do our best to stay ahead of the curve. Now once again, don your bunny suit and carefully mark your gluing area. At this point you may be getting a bit confused. What about this gap? We're actually going to be adding a piece of foam to this area, a bit of bunny chub, if you will. That'll allow for extra stretch and extra strength. Win-win! You know, unless you were hoping to look thin. Now you may notice while gluing this that it's turning into quite the lumpy mess. But never fear, foam is your best friend. Except for when it makes hot glue never dry. But foam is extremely malleable. You can add, you can subtract, you can shape, and you can detail. Right now, we're still just making a base to work off of, and we'll be fixing him up after said base is created. As a final check, we're going to be trying it all on once again. And don't worry if the cut in the back rips further and further, that's something we'll deal with later. So like I said before, be careful, it's easy to rip foam. The costume will be much, much stronger once fabric is involved and that Thor belly is added. Once you're suited up, take a good look and make sure everything is fitting right. In the foam stage, you can fix any issues you could be having, but once we move on, we move on. And we're moving on. Time for some arm tubes. Remember that tube phase we just came out of? Well, welcome back! Yeah, nobody told you costume making wasn't going to follow you into your nightmares. Measure the top of your shoulder down to the middle of your elbow, then measure around the arm and add 4 inches. We'll be cutting this tube out of 1/2 inch foam. This is probably the easiest part of the suit overall because you've already done this 4 times. Make sure it fits and make your other upper arm. Now throw them on and mark where your arm lays. Then add a line 5.5 inches below them and cut. Pretty simple. Now let's do the lower arms. Once again, this is a very easy process of measuring, marking, cutting the foam, and gluing it together. Now let's glue the lower arms to the upper arms. Make sure you don't mix the pieces up because you kind of don't want to do that. Like before, you're going to be tucking the lower piece into the upper one and gluing. Okay, now we got some currently useless arm tubes, so let's attach them. Now you could just glue them on as is, but doing so would make them a little bit more restrictive. If you want more mobility, you can make this entire connection out of strong yet stretchy fabric. The best thing I've found was this random pair of jeggings that I found on the floor. Perfect amount of stretch and strength. And working with tubes in general makes it all a bit easier to attach. I just slid the arm into the tube and glued it up. You'll also need to add more fabric to cover any holes, or, just wait until we do the fur. But the overall finishing thing will be far from seamless. But we'll work on that later. The important part is that we've got them attached. Now, in this next section, you may see some different looking attachments, but that's before I decided this was the best way, so try to ignore that. And let's get to transforming this chunky boy into something a bit more appealing. In your mind, you've probably been thinking, why the freak are you even making a foam body for such a simple suit design? Why not just sew it out of fabric entirely? To that I say, opinions are like butts. The reason I'm making the suit the way I am is because I'm comfortable with this style of making them. I want this suit to be bulky. It's just a stylistic choice. I want this suit to be extremely durable for my particular suit uses. But please, don't let me stop you from doing it your own way. Anyway, remembering to sharpen your scissors every once in a while will be a lifesaver. Or maybe, used incorrectly, a life taker. Disclaimer, do not kill anyone, you did not hear that from me. Since it would take years for me to explain all the problem areas I'm cleaning, instead I'm just going to show you a few techniques as I go. First off, you have the basic fat trimming, where you pinch, pull, and cut. You can also cut in the other direction to get a deeper slant. You may also need to add some foam along the way, but be careful, you do not want to add more than we need. At this point, it may be getting difficult to even see what you're working with, since we can't zip it up. So let's solve that. Now, before you start gluing away, we need to make certain we can still close it comfortably. If you're like me, you may be adding in more foam. Guess I had a few too many pieces of cake. Remember kids, never make your suit too tight. I would rather you be able to fit another person in there than to have it skin tight. Now grab out that box cutter because it's time to start slicing. Draw yourself a line in the foam and try your best to keep it right in the middle. Use that line to cut a pocket for the zipper to slide right into. If you recall, I mentioned that foam isn't super durable, probably like 6 times. So if you want that extra protection from an accidental pop-out, glue this thing like crazy. I hope you also gave yourself some wiggle room and got an extra large zipper. If you did, you can trim it to be exact and glue yourself a cute little stopper. And before we celebrate our first big milestone, let's check the fit. For my suit personally, I want to start by tightening up the top to make up for the loose back. After that, I need to readjust the crotch as it's gotten uneven, and I'd like the legs to be a bit longer. I also need to cinch in the sides ever so slightly, so Bonnie Boy doesn't look like Boxy Boy. Then I also drew a rough idea for where I want to add in more bunny chub, giving him a more realistic look. For this portion, refrain from using foam as that'll just make your suit heavier, hotter, and stiffer. Use batting instead. Lastly, I trimmed down the wrists and ankles. And remember, everything I'm doing here is to make my suit look better. You will likely have completely different demons that need to be faced. And there we go, my friends! You have just completed the utmost difficult part of the entire suit building process. Give yourself a nice greasy pizza break because we still have a long way to go. And for now, a very tension-easing portion of the build, our cute little bunny feets. You may be worried that this part is tricky, but you'll actually find yourself in a land of zen, as this is one of the easiest parts. Pull out your foam tile flooring, inch-thick foam, and some spare shoes to get started. Now for this, we're going to be making permanent shoe fixtures, so be sure to use shoes you or someone else won't miss. Like those Crocs your grandma got you for Christmas. Throw that shoe onto a tile and draw out your foot. If you suck at freehanding, you can always flip it over and draw it again until you're satisfied. But once you are, go ahead and cut that out. Now that we have our foot, you can flip it over and trace out the other side. Then make yourself one more of each for a total of 4 pieces. And now it's time to glue. To make it extra secured, you can also rough up the top so the glue can really seep in. And pour that glue in like it's ranch on a pizza, hot fudge on a sundae. I'm telling you, you can't use too much. When that's finished, fill in the cracks and even secure it from the side if you're feeling so inclined. By the end of this, you will have zero fear of your feet falling apart. Now let's build that foot up with our foam. There are endless ways of doing this, so let your creativity flow. I, however, glued a square to the top base and then a strip around the ankle. Then I added some toe strips to trim down. You really only need them to be half the length of mine, I just got scissor happy. Then you'll be left with a rough looking foot. If it's a bit too rough, like mine, you can use this technique. Just glue on a huge piece of 1/2-inch foam to smooth out the toes. It's a little bit time consuming, holding everything until it's dry, but it's just about the easiest way you can do it. And there we go! These things basically look good enough even without the fabric. Too bad I'm not making a white bunny. Now let's start up those cute little hands. Perfect for snatching. No fingerprints, no DNA. I'm telling you, this is the way to go. Now grab out your gloves and make sure they aren't those horrible stretchy winter gloves, or you'll have issues. I got these bad boys at Walmart from the manly men's section, so they're decently heavy duty. Now we could always just cover these in fabric and call it a day, but I'm thinking about the bigger picture here. We want these hands to be proportionate to the rest of our chunky bunny, so they definitely need to be bigger. To start off our customization, we need to stuff these things full of batting. Instead of letting the glue seep in and burn our skin off as we work, this is a much better option. Trust me, I've tested them both. Make sure every last finger is stuffed like a plushie, and let's begin. Glue your glove onto a hunk of 1/2-inch foam. But be sure to only glue the hand and the palm, and not the fingers. We don't want to lose much of our mobility. Then you can trim the excess. Now make yourself a few strips of inch-thick foam. We'll be rolling these into little finger extensions. You could just cut out a square instead, but that would leave them lacking any kind of density. Make one for each finger and keep them all about the same size. You can also push in the middle as they dry to make a concave shape to slide the fingers right into. Glue them real good so they don't fall off, and there you have it. Our gloves look much better. And with that, our foam body is nearly complete. I can already feel myself getting into character. We're almost ready to start our head. But first, let's get Bonnie into his own costume, which includes his vest and bow. But wait, he needs fur first, doesn't he? Well, actually, it'll make our lives a little bit easier and cheaper if we do it the way I'm about to show ya. Grab your marker and go ahead and draw that vest and bow right onto him. With that outline, you're going to want to fill in that vest area with a clean and sharp layer of 1/2-inch foam. Pull out a brand new roll and cut out armholes. This is pretty much the simplest way to do the vest that I know of. Be wary of leftover glue and messy cuts, as the material that'll cover this foam will not be forgiving. But if you take your time, this shouldn't be a problem. Also remember not to glue the very edge, as this gap will be extremely useful. Now while we're at it, let's make that bow. This should be beyond easy. Just draw out the shape of the bow on inch-thick foam. You can also use measurements to make sure it's decently even, while still keeping in mind that it shouldn't be perfect. Glue on another layer of inch-thick foam, and draw out some wrinkles if you're feeling funky. Then all you gotta do is carve. And that'll be our bow. Now we just have one last detail to carve out. Bonnie's tail. This is also very easy and can be made in basically the same way. Neither the bow or the tail will be attached for now, so just hold on to them. And thank goodness, finally! It's time to begin the most important part of our suit. Bonnie's head. Per usual, we need to make ourselves a base. But keep in mind, the head is one of the least stressful and confusing parts of the costume, so feel free to stray from my instructions and build it any way you want. I, however, will be following the method that has been seared into my brain from the years of crafting. I start with a big hunk of inch-thick foam and roll it up into a tube. Make sure you can fit your head inside comfortably, not too tight, and definitely not a bobblehead. From there, make yourself some zigzags and cut them out. If you're lucky enough to have a head about the same height as mine, you can make a spare base for next time. Hooray for shortcuts! Glue the spikes together and you have yourselves a decently round head. Go ahead and do this process one more time, as the head we currently have is far too small for our giant body. You can even do it a third time if you still think it's too small. Now let's start making this look like something. To make it easier on yourself, draw out Spring Bonnie's face on the foam to get an idea as to where everything is going to go. Make sure you do yourself a favor though, and pinpoint where your eyes sit so you can work from that. If you make that a secondary priority, like I did with Freddy here, you are going to have issues. Now let's add our snout. As you may know, Bonnie's head looks almost exactly like this base, and his face is pretty much just another portion that sits right on top of it. That makes him quite the simple design. All we need to do is attach ourselves a big slice of foam to carve out. For this portion, I opted into using high-density green foam. This stuff can be pricey, so it's an optional pick. The reason I prefer it is how sleek the sculpting can be, and because it comes in very thick measurements. Mine is 4 inches thick. As for making your head, don't let yourself be discouraged. Bonnie's gonna have his moments. If you feel frustrated, try stabbing some foam with your... take the rest of the night off! To help you out, I'll drop a few life-saving tips. If you feel like you can't trust your eyes to make sure what you're sculpting is even, by the way you can't, make yourself a quick little guide out of some paper and stick to it. Make sure as you're sculpting you check each and every angle of your head to make sure it all works together. And one last tidbit, if your jaw is floppy like mine, grab a wire hanger and bend it into a frame. Pop it in and your life will be changed. Eventually, you're going to be happy with what you've made. And we can finally move on to our ears. Start by grabbing some inch-thick foam and measure out about 16 inches. This is how long our ears are going to be, and the thickest part will be around 4 inches. From there, cut them out and shape. Now we'll need to pull out more wire hangers and some springs. No, not spring locks. We are not doing that again. Just regular old springs, please. Make yourself a little tunnel for these in your foam and lay in the wire. Glob in some glue in just a few areas, specifically places that are least likely to be bent. Then trim and glue the ends. As for your springs, you're going to want a bend, but you also want your ears to be up most of the time. To test how your springs hold up, tape one in and see how it does. Mine are way too weak to hold the ears alone, so I'll be using 3. Keep in mind fabric and glue will make your ears heavier as well, so play it safe. Glue the spring in there like your life depends on it, and once you're satisfied, close up your patient with a layer of half-inch foam. Pretty frickin' simple and adorable. There is still so much missing with this bunny face, but all of it will be prepared after the fabric. So now it's time for the second most difficult part of making this suit. And poor you thought it was smooth sailing after that nightmare of a foam body. Well, just wait. This might even be your least favorite. Envision holding stress in your hands. The knowledge that a suit is only as good as its upholstery, the texture, the give, the smell, the already drying hot glue. Oh crap, you haven't figured out where this goes. You're running out of time, what are you going to do? If it dries, it'll never be the same. Your entire body is about to be ruined. Okay, I'll stop scaring you. It's the fabric, and we've got a lot of it. Now, depending on the fabric you've chosen, the difficulty could range from easy to expert plus. So let me clue you in. The best fabric, of course, is the one that you feel looks the best. But if you want difficulty to be prioritized, consider getting fabric with these qualities. Plenty of stretch, decently thick, and/or has fur. All of these characteristics will be the easiest to work with. Stretch helps reduce the amount of seams you have to deal with, thickness will help smooth out imperfections and wrinkles, and fur will help hide the seams. In my case, I chose a medium difficulty fabric. Absolutely no stretch, but thickness and fur to help ease the seam issue I'll face. However, this amazing fabric didn't arrive perfect. The only fabric I had found that I was happy with actually had a fur I shaved to near baldness over the course of 9 hours. No good costume is easy to make. Start by planning where your chunks of material are going to go. It can't be seamless, so try hiding them on the sides of your body or under your arms. Grab your material and cut out a portion you think will suffice for your area with plenty, and I mean plenty, of wiggle room. Start gluing it on little by little, pulling out wrinkles as you go. Eventually you'll come across an area with excess fabric that needs to be fixed. You can either glue it together and cut it off, the slightly more messy way that I always go with, or you can cut a triangle to glue together. You will do this until your entire suit is furred. You will have burns. You will feel burned. You'll be embarrassed of tiny areas no one will notice. But don't let yourself be discouraged. Give yourself a controlled shock if you have to, just don't give up. We're in the end game now. Eventually your body will be fabricked and you'll be ready to face the head, as intimidating as it can be. Just be careful, don't rush it, and you'll do fine. There's also another way to fabric heads that may be easier or look better for you that I've never tried and therefore cannot teach. That would be making a pattern with tape. And now take a step back and enjoy for a moment the feeling of having every difficult part of the costume done! You deserve a pat on the back, my friend. Without stopping, let's get into those details. Because details are what truly bring a suit to life. First off, use either puff paint or transfer paper to decorate your currently lackluster vest. Unless you were lucky enough to find purple fabric with stars. Glue on your bow, attach Bonnie's tail to one side of the zipper, and add Velcro to the other side, as we did the vest. Grab your feet and attach that spare piece of foam flooring to cover up your leftover material. If you're worried your suit is going to fall apart as I am, get an upholstery needle and sew in some thick stitches on your most vulnerable of seams. Or just glue them on if you want the aesthetic. You can also throw on some buttons to make him just that much more dapper. Once you're satisfied with the body, we can add our finishing touches to Bonnie's face. I'm starting to think he looks a bit uncanny without teeth, so let's get to it. Go ahead and pull out your foam flooring. We'll be using this because these teeth will not be covered in fabric, and we need the densest foam we have to get the effect of being real teeth. Scrabble pieces are also fantastic if you have them on hand. I suggest making yourself a little cardstock stencil to make sure your teeth all turn out about the same size. And since teeth don't generally have a texture like this, let's fix that with a bit of Mod Podge. Unless you bought fancy costume foam, which I didn't even think of. For my teeth though, I am slathering that crap on. After a few layers, they will look as dandy as this. Then douse them with the paint of your choice. I personally went with a mix of white, antique white, and glow in the dark. Once they're dry, you can start gluing them into place. Do this very carefully, and have a plan in mind so they're spaced well. Let's attach those ears already. Dig yourself a hole with your box knife and fill that sucker in with glue and then your ear. Pretty self-explanatory. If they don't stand by themselves at the end, it means you need more glue. And with that, it's time to make our peepers. We're going to start with these overpowered DIY Christmas ornaments. These are amazing for so many reasons, but I'm not here to sell them. I'm here to transform them. Cut yourself 8 squares of your fiberglass mesh, 4 being for each eye. While using these eyes, your vision will be slightly blurred, but your eyes will be fully hidden. Now prepare yourself for some spray paint. Make sure you either do this outside or in a well-ventilated workspace. I'm lucky enough to have this laundry room with ventilation, so I covered the whole thing with plastic to protect the walls and such from paint dust. You're going to first want to turn this black into white. Spray on thin, fine layers, refraining from creating blockages between the mesh. Once you're satisfied, you can start the actual eyes. Cut out the eye size you want on 9 pieces of cardstock. 9 because I did make a backup. From there, we're going to be taping them onto our squares. Then, very simply, you can spray paint all of them.
Is someone there?
Now, prepare yourself here for a bit of a tricky part. You're going to grab a big roundish hunk of foam and carefully place 4 of the squares onto it, lining up your paint as best as you can. Take your lens and push it into the stack. You're going to want to push it in there so well all your wrinkles are gone. This will take some tinkering, but trust me, it will work. Once it's as good as it gets, glue the mesh to the sides of the lens. And voila! The absolute best pair of eyes I've ever seen. Now all we need to do is add some eyelashes, which I made out of black foam sheets, and eyelids that were just made with a slice of material. These eyes may have been time-consuming, but consider that most people look at other people and/or characters in the eyes, and you want to put your best foot forward with your craft. Now we're almost done, you guys. I bet you can't even sit still, you're so hyped up. Make yourself a pair of trustworthy eyebrows, an itty-bitty nose, and some big whiskers made from wire hanger and foam board. There are nearly endless upgrades you can add if you're feeling extra. After months of tirelessly working on this costume, yes, it's been months, I'm exhausted, it is finally complete! Our warm and friendly rabbit character is finally ready to see the sunlight. Welcome back to the workshop. I do hope I was able to help you out with your suit, whether it was a Foxy or a Freddy, maybe even a Frost Bear. Or heck, you just watch this because you're bored. Either way, I do appreciate the support. Another way you can help me out is by checking out my Pokemon Go channel, where the less stabby version of me innocently plays a game about collecting creatures, such as this topical Ronamon. But never fear, I'll be seeing you again soon. Bye bye!